The whole town watched Sabine Mercer disappear a little more each day, and not one person thought it strange. They watched her mother take food from her plate and call it discipline. They watched shopkeepers hand Sabine the heaviest crates because, as they liked to say, she was built for it. They watched women whisper behind gloved hands when she passed, and men step aside with mocking smiles, as though her body were a wagon taking up too much road. Sabine learned to lower her eyes, fold her hands over her stomach, and say sorry before anyone had accused her of anything. Sorry for standing in a doorway. Sorry for sitting on a bench. Sorry for breathing too loudly after carrying flour uphill. Then one cold evening, a scarred mountain man named Emil Sayer heard her apologize simply because her shadow had fallen across his boots. He looked at her for a long moment and said, "You do that often." Sabine thought he meant blocking the light. She whispered that she would move. Emil shook his head. "No, you apologize for existing." Those words frightened her more than any insult ever had, because they were the first words anyone had spoken that made her wonder whether the shame belonged to her at all. The town of Bellwether sat in a narrow valley beneath the Greyback Mountains, where winter clouds gathered early and stayed late. The houses were packed along one muddy road, with a church at one end and a silver company office at the other. People in Bellwether liked to call themselves practical. They believed hardship made them honest. They believed suffering was useful when it happened to someone else. Sabine had lived there all 23 years of her life, most of them in the back rooms of Mercer House, the boarding home her mother ran beside the livery stable. Mercer House had once belonged to Sabine's father, Thomas. In Sabine's childhood, it had smelled of cedar soap, baked apples, and the tobacco he kept in a blue tin near the stove. After he died beneath a collapsed freight wagon, the rooms changed. The walls seemed darker. The floorboards stayed cold. Her mother, Lenora Mercer, stopped laughing and began counting every spoonful of flour as though someone might steal it. Lenora was not loud when she was cruel. That would have been easier. She spoke softly, with a tired patience that made other people believe she was the one being tested. On the morning Emil Sayer first came to Mercer House, Sabine stood beside the kitchen table cutting day-old bread into thin slices. A pot of oatmeal bubbled on the stove. 6 boarders waited in the dining room, stamping snow from their boots and calling for coffee. Lenora entered carrying a small bowl. "That is enough bread," she said. Sabine looked at the 12 slices on the board. "Mr. Croft asked for more yesterday. Mr. Croft pays." Sabine understood. She set down the knife. Her mother dipped oatmeal into the bowl and placed it on the corner of the work table. It was barely half full. Sabine glanced toward the dining room. "Is that mine?" Lenora's mouth tightened, not quite becoming a smile. "You had stew last night." "I had broth. And bread." "The heel." Lenora's eyes became still. "Are you questioning me?" "No, Mama." "Good. I worry about your health, Sabine. A woman of your size must show restraint." Sabine lowered her gaze to the bowl. Her stomach had ached since before sunrise. She had hauled 2 coal buckets, scrubbed the front steps, kneaded 3 loaves, and carried a trunk upstairs for a traveling salesman who had laughed when she paused to catch her breath. Lenora touched Sabine's arm as if offering comfort. People notice when a girl has no self-control. Sabine swallowed. "Yes, Mama." From the doorway came the sound of a chair scraping. One of the boarders, Mr. Lyle, leaned into the kitchen. He was a narrow man with a red nose and a habit of looking at Sabine as though she were a piece of furniture. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, "there's a fellow out front, asking about a room." Lenora brightened at once. "Did he say how long?" "Just wants breakfast, I think. Looks like he came down from the high country." Lenora gave Sabine the bowl. "Take it to the pantry. You can eat later." Sabine carried the oatmeal into the pantry and placed it on a shelf beside jars of dried beans. She knew later would never come. By noon, the oatmeal would be cold. By afternoon, Lenora would say it had spoiled and pour it into the chicken trough. When Sabine entered the dining room with fresh coffee, she saw Emil Sayer sitting alone near the window. He was taller than any man in the room, though he seemed to be trying not to show it. His shoulders were broad beneath a dark wool coat dusted with snow. His hair was brown, nearly black, and longer than most men in town wore it. A pale scar crossed his right temple and disappeared beneath his hair. He had not removed his gloves. There was something quiet about him that made the room feel louder. Mr. Lyle pointed at Sabine with his fork. "There she is, best crane in the county. Need something lifted? Ask Sabine." Several men laughed. Sabine kept pouring coffee. Another boarder, Amos Croft, leaned back in his chair. "Careful with the floorboards, girl. We had that repair bill last spring." The men laughed again, though not as loudly. Amos was smiling as though he had offered harmless advice. Sabine felt heat move into her face. She turned too quickly, and the coffee in the pot rolled near the rim. Lenora appeared beside her. "Steady. You know how clumsy you become when people look at you." "I'm sorry." Her mother gave the boarders a patient smile. "She means well." Sabine moved toward Emil's table. His cup was still empty. When she reached him, he shifted his boots beneath his chair. Sabine saw her shadow cross them and stepped back at once. "Sorry," she whispered. Emil looked up. His eyes were gray-green, the color of pine needles beneath ice. "For what?" "I was in your way. You were pouring coffee." "Yes, sir. You do that often." Her fingers tightened around the handle. "I can move." "No." His gaze stayed on her face. "You apologize often." Sabine did not know what to say. Across the room, Amos called, "She ought to. Girl like that takes up half a room." A few men snorted into their cups. Emil turned his head. He did not glare. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at Amos, until the man's smile faded. Then Emil looked back at Sabine. "Coffee, please." She filled his cup. "Thank you," he said. Sabine almost looked behind her to see who he meant. Emil ate eggs, 2 slices of bread, and a bowl of oatmeal. He paid Lenora with a silver coin and asked for nothing more. Before leaving, he paused beside the kitchen door, where Sabine was scraping plates. "You made the bread?" he asked. "Yes, it's good." The compliment struck her with such force that she forgot to answer. Lenora stepped between them. "Sabine follows my recipe." Emil's eyes moved to Lenora, then back to Sabine. "Still good." After he left, Lenora closed the kitchen door. "What did you say to him?" "Nothing." "He does not speak to people without reason." Sabine stared at the dishwater. "He asked about the bread. And I told him I made it." Lenora's hand closed around Sabine's wrist. Her fingers were thin, but they knew where to press. "You told a stranger you made my bread. I'm sorry. You are not the owner of this house. You are not the hostess. You are not a woman men come here to admire." "I know." Lenora released her. "Good. Then act like it." Sabine washed dishes until her knuckles cracked from the hot water. She tried not to think about Emil Sayer. Men from the mountains came and went. Trappers, miners, hunters, timber cutters. Some were rough, some were lonely. Most stared at Sabine or looked away too quickly. Emil had done neither. That should have made him easier to forget. It did not. 3 days later, he returned. Sabine was outside splitting kindling behind the boarding house. Snow fell in small, dry flakes. She wore one of her father's old coats, altered badly at the seams, and a pair of gloves with the fingers worn through. She did not hear Emil approach until his shadow touched the chopping block. Sabine stepped back. "Sorry." His face changed slightly. She looked down. "You said I do it often." "I did. I'm trying not to." "Are you?" "No." The corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but it softened him. He glanced at the woodpile. "Your mother makes you split all this." "She runs the house. I help." "You also cook." "Yes." "Clean?" "Yes." "Carry trunks?" "When needed." "Serve meals?" "Yes." "What does she do?" Sabine looked toward the back windows. "She manages." "Does she pay you?" Sabine's stomach tightened. "She is my mother." "That was not my question." "She feeds me." Emil looked at her gloves, then at the woodpile, then at the kitchen window where Lenora's face had appeared behind the curtain. "Does she?" Sabine felt fear move beneath her ribs. She lifted the axe again. I should finish. Emil stepped aside. I need someone at my lodge. The axe stopped halfway to the block. He spoke calmly. The place has been shut most of the winter. I need the kitchen opened, rooms cleaned, supplies counted, linens aired. Sabine's hands went cold inside her torn gloves. Why are you telling me? Because you know how to run a house. My mother runs this house. You run this house. She stared at him. The snow caught in his hair. He did not seem embarrassed by the silence. Sabine tried to laugh, but the sound came out small. You don't know me. I know what I've seen. You've seen me twice. That was enough to see everyone asks from you, and no one asks about you. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. She turned away quickly. Emil's voice lowered. I'm not offering charity. Then what are you offering? Work. A room. A share of what the lodge earns when it reopens. Sabine wiped her cheek with the back of her wrist. What lodge? Sayer Lodge, North Ridge. She knew the name. Everyone did. Sayer Lodge had been built before the railroad came through Bellwether. Hunters and survey crews once stayed there. Years ago, the lodge had closed after Emil's younger brother disappeared during a winter storm. Some people said the brother had stolen money and fled. Others said Emil had killed him in a fight. Children dared one another to climb the lower trail at night and look for ghosts in the windows. Sabine had never believed in ghosts, but she believed in men who lied. She stepped farther from Emil. You live there alone. Yes. You expect me to go into the mountains with you. I expect nothing. And sleep under your roof. You would have your own room. Sabine looked toward the house again. Lenora had vanished from the window. What would you expect from me at night? Emil became very still. Sabine hated the question as soon as she asked it. She hated the shame in her voice and the way she could not look at him. At night, he said, I expect you to sleep. She looked up. He did not seem offended. He seemed sad. I won't touch you, he said. I won't enter your room. I won't ask anything that is not part of the work we agree upon. No man offers a woman a room for nothing. I did not say nothing. I said work. What if I say no? Then I go home alone. What if I go with you and change my mind? I bring you back. What if you are lying? Emil's jaw tightened. He looked toward the ridge, where clouds pressed low over the dark trees. Then you should not come. That answer confused her. Lenora opened the back door. Sabine, inside. Sabine set down the axe. Her mother looked at Emil. Mr. Sayer. Mrs. Mercer, you have business with my daughter? I offered her employment. Lenora laughed softly. Sabine? Yes. What kind of employment? Housekeeping and management at the lodge. Lenora's smile remained, but the skin around her eyes tightened. My daughter is not experienced enough to manage anything. She manages this place. She follows instructions. She cooks, cleans, carries supplies, serves guests, and repairs what breaks. She is slow. Emil looked at the stacked wood, then at the repaired fence, then at the clean kitchen windows. No, he said. She is careful. Lenora folded her arms. Sabine is needed here. She can decide that. For the first time, Lenora's smile disappeared. She is my daughter. She is 23. She owes me. Sabine stared at her mother. Emil's voice remained quiet. For what? Lenora looked at Sabine as if the answer should have been obvious. For every year I kept her fed, for every dress I had to alter, for every doctor who told me her appetite would ruin her health. Raising her cost me more than raising 3 ordinary girls. Sabine felt something inside her go still. Emil did not look at Lenora. He looked at Sabine. Do you believe that? He asked. Lenora stepped forward. Do not fill her head with foolishness. Emil waited. Sabine could not answer. Her mouth moved, but no words came. Lenora caught her elbow. Inside. Sabine followed, because she had always followed. That night, Lenora locked the pantry. She claimed flour had gone missing. Sabine sat on the edge of her narrow bed in the attic room and listened to the wind push against the roof. The room had no stove. Frost formed along the inside of the small window. Below, the boarders laughed over apple brandy. her stomach cramped with hunger. A soft knock came at the door. Sabine stood quickly. Lenora entered carrying a candle. "I hope you are not considering that man's offer." Sabine stared at the flame. "I don't know." "You do know." "Mama, he lives alone because no decent person can bear him. His brother vanished. People say there was blood on the snow. People say many things." Lenora's face sharpened. "Do not become clever with me. I wasn't. You think he wants a housekeeper. A man does not take a woman like you into his home because he admires her housekeeping." Sabine's throat tightened. Lenora sat beside her. Her voice became gentle again. "You are innocent. That makes you foolish. Men who cannot have pretty women sometimes choose women they believe no one will defend." Sabine's hands began to tremble. Her mother touched her cheek. "I am hard on you because the world is harder." "Is that why you lock the food?" Lenora's hand fell. Sabine hardly recognized her own voice. "Is that why you tell people I break chairs when I don't? Is that why I sleep up here while Mr. Lyle has the room with the stove? You are becoming ungrateful. I'm cold. We are all cold. You have a fire." Lenora stood. "You see? This is what he has done after 2 conversations. He has made you selfish." Sabine's eyes filled. "I only said I was cold, and I have spent 23 years trying to teach you that wanting comfort does not mean you deserve it." The words were spoken so quietly that they seemed almost tender. Lenora moved toward the door. Sabine wiped at her face. "Did Papa think I was a burden?" Her mother stopped. "Your father loved you," she said. "That isn't what I asked." Lenora looked back, and for one brief moment, Sabine saw something in her expression that was not anger. It was fear. "Your father made excuses for you," Lenora said. "That is why you never learned restraint." She closed the door and turned the key from the outside. Sabine sat in darkness after the candlelight disappeared beneath the door. She did not cry at first. She pressed both hands over her mouth and told herself she was too old for tears. She told herself Lenora was right. She told herself hunger was not cruelty, only discipline. Cold was not punishment, only winter. Work was not slavery if it was done for family. Then she remembered Emil saying, "You apologize for existing." A sound broke from her chest. Sabine bent forward and cried so hard her ribs hurt. She cried for the child who had learned to hide bread in her sleeves. She cried for every room she had entered sideways, so people would not joke about the space she filled. She cried because a stranger had noticed her suffering after 2 visits, while an entire town had watched it for years and called it ordinary. Near midnight, the key turned. Sabine straightened, wiping her face. The door opened. Not Lenora. Mrs. Finch, an elderly boarder, with silver hair and a trembling left hand, stood in the doorway. She held a plate covered with a cloth. "You'll freeze," Mrs. Finch whispered. Sabine stared. The old woman placed the plate on the bed. Beneath the cloth were 2 biscuits and a slice of ham. "Your mother will put me out if she knows." Sabine's voice shook. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Mrs. Finch looked down. That silence answered more than words could. "I told myself it was family business," she whispered. "People say that when they do not wish to be brave." Sabine took a biscuit, but could not eat it. "Is Mr. Sayer dangerous?" she asked. Mrs. Finch sat beside her. "Emil Sayer is a hard man. Grief hardened him. That is not the same as cruelty. What happened to his brother? No one knows. Do you believe Emil hurt him?" Mrs. Finch thought for a moment. "I believe this town needed a story that allowed it to stop asking questions." Sabine looked toward the window. The mountain ridge was hidden behind snow. At sunrise, she packed 2 dresses, her father's blue tobacco tin, a brush, a sewing kit, and the small wooden spoon he had carved for her when she was 8. Everything fit into one worn carpet bag. Lenora found her near the front door. "You cannot leave." Sabine's hand tightened around the bag. He offered work. "You belong here." "No." The word was so small that Lenora almost missed it. "What did you say?" Sabine's heart pounded. "I said no." Lenora stepped closer. "That house is mine." "Yes." "The food is mine." "Yes." "The clothes on your back were bought with my money." I made them. From my cloth. Sabine nodded slowly. Then I'll leave them. She set down the bag and began unfastening her coat. Lenora's face changed. Stop being dramatic. You said the clothes belong to you. Put your coat on. Sabine did. Lenora lowered her voice. He will tire of you. Sabine swallowed. He will look at you one morning and understand why no one else wanted you. Then he will send you down the mountain with nowhere to go. Each word landed exactly where Lenora intended. Sabine's eyes burned, but she held the bag. Maybe, she whispered. Lenora seemed surprised. Sabine opened the door. Emil waited beside a dark wagon. 2 horses stood steaming in the cold. He did not rush toward her. He did not take her bag without asking. Are you certain? He said. No one had ever asked Sabine that before a decision. She looked back at Mercer House. Lenora stood in the doorway, one hand pressed against the frame. Sabine thought of the locked pantry, the attic frost, her father's blue tobacco tin. No, she said honestly. I'm not certain at all. Emil nodded. You can still come. She climbed into the wagon. For the first mile, Sabine expected Lenora to run after them. For the next 5, she expected Emil to reveal the price of his kindness. He drove without speaking much. The road climbed through dense pine forest, where snow rested on branches like folded linen. The town disappeared behind them. The air grew colder and cleaner. Bellwether's church steeple became a thin grey needle below. Sabine sat stiffly, clutching her bag against her stomach. After an hour, Emil handed her a wrapped parcel. What is it? Food. She did not take it. It isn't poisoned, he said. Her face warmed. I didn't think that. You did. Sabine slowly accepted the parcel. Inside were cheese, bread, and 2 boiled eggs. She looked at him. This is too much. It is lunch. I don't need both eggs. I packed both for you. She held the food but did not eat. Emil kept his eyes on the trail. Does eating in front of people trouble you? Sabine's throat tightened. He sighed. You don't have to answer. My mother watches. I'm not your mother. I know. Then eat when you are hungry. Her fingers trembled as she peeled an egg. She took small bites at first. Emil said nothing. When she finished the first egg, shame rose inside her. She waited for him to notice. He adjusted the reins. That was all. Sabine ate the second egg. The lodge appeared near dusk. It stood on a wide shelf of land beneath the northern ridge, built from dark logs and grey stone. It was larger than Sabine expected, with 2 floors, a long porch, and 6 narrow chimneys. Snow covered the roof. The windows reflected the pale sky. Behind it, the mountains rose steep and silent. It looks empty, Sabine said. It has been. How long? Almost 4 years. Since your brother vanished. Emil's hands tightened around the reins. Yes. The front door opened into a great room with a stone fireplace, long tables, dusty chairs, and a staircase curving toward the upper floor. White sheets covered the furniture. The air smelled of cold wood and old smoke. Emil lit 2 lamps. Sabine looked around with wonder despite her fear. This could hold 30 guests. 24, comfortably. Why reopen now? Emil removed his coat. The railway plans a survey road across the lower pass. Travelers will need lodging. That isn't the whole answer. He glanced at her. Sabine immediately lowered her eyes. Sorry. Emil closed his eyes briefly. I didn't mean to question you, she said. You are allowed to question me. I don't know how. Practice. She almost smiled. He showed her the kitchen, pantry, laundry room, and guest bedrooms. Everything was dusty, but the building was strong. The pantry held sacks of flour, beans, rice, dried fruit, coffee, sugar, and salted meat. There was more food in one room than Sabine had seen in months. Emil noticed her staring. You may eat anything here. She nodded without believing him. At the end of the upper hall stood a dark green door with an iron lock. Emil walked past it. What room is that? Sabine asked. He stopped. His back remained turned. My brother's. Why is it locked? Because I keep it locked. His tone was not cruel, but it ended the conversation. Sabine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Her room was across the hall from the locked one. It held a wide bed, a washstand, a small fireplace, and a window facing the ridge. Fresh blankets had been folded at the foot of the bed. "You prepared this," she said. "Yes." "When?" "Yesterday." "You came down the mountain before dawn, ate breakfast, watched me work, made your offer, came back here, prepared a room, then returned to town this morning." "Yes." "You thought I would come. I hoped you might." The answer frightened her. Emil moved toward the door. "There is a bolt inside." "Use it." Sabine looked at him. "I will sleep downstairs," he said. "My room is near the kitchen." "Why?" "So you won't hear footsteps in the hall and wonder whether they are mine." Her eyes filled again. Emil looked uncomfortable, as though her tears were something delicate he did not know how to hold. "I'll start a fire," he said. After he left, Sabine closed the door and slid the bolt into place. She stood in the middle of the room, listening. No key turned from the outside. That first night, she slept in her dress, with a chair braced beneath the handle. Near midnight, she woke to a faint light moving across the ridge. Sabine sat up. Beyond the glass, high among the trees, a single pale glow appeared, vanished, then appeared again. Once, twice, 3 times. It stopped. Sabine stared into the darkness. A few minutes later, a floorboard creaked in the hall. She held her breath. Another creak, slow. Careful. Someone stopped outside the locked green door. Metal touched metal. Sabine slipped from the bed and crossed the room without lighting a lamp. She placed her ear against her door. A key turned across the hall. The green door opened. For several minutes she heard nothing. Then came a sound so low she almost believed it was the wind. A man crying. Sabine returned to bed and pulled the blanket to her chin. In the morning, Emil was already outside cutting ice from the pump. He did not mention the room. Sabine did not ask. They began work on the lodge. Dust came down in clouds. Curtains were washed, floors scrubbed, mattresses carried outside and beaten clean. Emil repaired shutters and roof tiles. Sabine opened windows, sorted linens, and planned meals for future guests. At first, she waited for him to correct everything she did. He did not. When she moved a cupboard, he asked why. To keep flour away from the damp wall. He examined the wall. Good. When she suggested turning the unused reading room into a smaller dining room for winter, he listened. It would hold warmth better, she explained. No reason to heat the great room for 6 guests. Do it. She stared. Just like that. You know more about running a house than I do. But it's your lodge. It is our work. The word our followed Sabine for the rest of the day. Emil remained distant in other ways. He spoke little about the past. He never entered her room. He never touched her without warning. When they carried a table together, he told her before shifting his grip. When he handed her tools, he placed them within reach instead of pressing them into her palm. He also left food where she could find it. A bowl of nuts on the kitchen table, apples near the stove, bread wrapped in cloth, cheese in the cold pantry. For several days, Sabine ate only at meals. Then, one afternoon, while Emil repaired a chimney, she stood alone in the kitchen staring at an apple. No one was watching. Her body felt hungry. Her mother's voice filled her mind. People notice when a girl has no self-control. Sabine reached for the apple, then pulled her hand back. She did this 3 times. On the 4th, she took it. The first bite was crisp and sweet. She chewed quickly, ashamed. Emil entered carrying a box of nails. Sabine froze. The apple was halfway to her mouth. He looked at it, then at her face. She set it down. I was going to ask, for an apple? Yes. Why? Because it's yours. It's food. I haven't earned it. Emil placed the nails on the table. Sabine, he said gently, you worked since sunrise. That doesn't mean. Even if you had done nothing today, you would still be allowed to eat. Her eyes burned. He seemed to understand that this was not a simple argument. My brother used to forget meals, Emil said. He would work until his hands shook. I would become angry with him. Why? Because I thought neglecting himself was foolish. Sabine looked at the apple. Was it? She asked. Yes. Then why does it feel different when I do it? Because someone taught you your pain was a virtue. The words opened something inside her. Sabine sank into a chair. She covered her face, but the tears came through her fingers. I don't know when I'm hungry anymore, she whispered. Sometimes I feel it, but then I think I'm greedy. Sometimes I eat and I hear her voice. Sometimes I want something and I hate myself before I even touch it. Emil pulled out the chair across from her. He did not come closer. My brother's name was Peter, he said after a moment. When our father died, Peter was 16. I became responsible for him. I thought responsibility meant keeping him alive. I didn't understand it also meant listening. Sabine lowered her hands. What happened? Emil looked toward the window. We fought the night he disappeared. About what? He believed someone was stealing land from families along the ridge. I told him he was chasing shadows. He wanted me to go to Bellwether with him and speak to the county recorder. I refused. Why? I was tired, angry, proud. His voice roughened. He said I cared more about the lodge than people. I told him if he hated the place so much, he should leave. Sabine barely breathed. He left during a storm, Emil continued. His horse returned 2 days later. Peter did not. I'm sorry. Emil gave a small, broken laugh. You apologize for storms too? No. She wiped her face. That one was for you. He looked at her then. The room became very quiet. You should eat your apple, he said. Sabine picked it up. This time, she finished it slowly. The lights returned 3 nights later. 1 glow, then darkness. 2 glows, then 3. Sabine watched from her window. A minute later, Emil crossed the yard carrying a lantern and a rifle. He disappeared into the trees. Sabine stayed awake until dawn. He returned with mud on his boots and a torn sleeve. At breakfast, she set down his coffee. Where did you go? Emil looked tired. The ridge. Because of the lights. His eyes sharpened. You saw them? Yes. You should stay away from that side of the property. Why? The trail is unstable. That isn't an answer. No. Sabine's pulse quickened. Is someone up there? I don't know. You went looking. Yes. With a rifle. For animals. Animals with lanterns. His mouth tightened. Fear rose inside her, old and familiar. She stood too quickly, knocking her chair against the floor. Emil looked up. Sabine, you promised I could leave if I changed my mind. You can. Today, if you wish. His answer made her hesitate. A cruel man would have argued. A liar might have blocked the door. Emil reached into his pocket and placed a folded banknote on the table. That is 2 weeks' wages, he said. The wagon is ready. I can take you down after breakfast. Sabine stared at the money. No one had ever paid her for work. You would let me go without explaining? I would rather you leave than stay afraid of me. The pain in his face was restrained, but she saw it. You are hiding something, she said. Yes. Is it dangerous? Possibly. To me. His silence lasted too long. Sabine stepped back. Emil rose. I would not harm you. That isn't what I asked. He looked toward the ceiling, toward the locked room above them. The lights began 3 months ago, he said. Always the same pattern. 1, 2, 3. What does it mean? When we were boys, Peter and I used lantern signals in the woods. 1 flash meant safe, 2 meant wait, 3 meant come. Sabine felt cold. You think your brother is alive. I don't know what I think. Why haven't you told the sheriff? I did, after the first light. He climbed 1/2 mile, looked at the trees, and told me grief makes men see what they wish to see. Did you find tracks? Sometimes. Human? Yes. Why not follow them? They vanish near Vale property. Sabine knew the name. Gideon Vale owned the silver office, the sawmill, the freight yard, and half the buildings in Bellwether. He paid for the church roof and chose which families received credit at the general store. People called him generous because they feared calling him powerful. What does Mr. Vale have to do with Peter? Peter accused him of forging debts. The room seemed to narrow. Whose debts? Families along the ridge, small farms, timber claims, cabins. Vale would lend money, then produce papers showing they owed twice what they borrowed. If they could not pay, he took the land. Sabine remembered men at Mercer House speaking about lost claims. They always blamed bad luck or drink. Did Peter have proof? He said he did. Where? I never found it. Sabine looked toward the stairs. In the locked room. Emil's expression closed. She felt anger rise beneath her fear. You ask me to trust you while keeping half the house hidden. That room belonged to my brother, and I sleep across from it while you enter at night and cry. Emil looked stricken. Sabine's voice shook. I heard you. He turned away. She expected him to become angry. Instead, he gripped the back of a chair and bowed his head. I go there when I cannot remember his voice, he said. The anger drained from her. Emil opened his hand. A small brass key lay in his palm. I have not shown that room to anyone, he whispered. Not because I fear what you will find. Because I fear what I will feel. He placed the key on the table. Sabine did not touch it. They went upstairs together. Emil unlocked the green door. The room smelled of paper, cedar, and dust. A narrow bed stood against one wall. Maps covered another. Books were stacked on the floor. A coat hung from a peg, as though its owner might return before supper. On the desk sat a wooden horse, roughly carved. Sabine picked it up. Emil's voice softened. Peter made that when he was 12. A notebook lay open beside it. The last page held a list of names and numbers. Mercer appeared near the bottom. Sabine leaned closer. Beside the name was written, Loan recorded twice. Original missing. LM present. What does LM mean? Emil stood behind her. I don't know. Sabine did. Lenora Mercer. She sat down hard in the desk chair. My mother borrowed money after Papa died. How much? She said $200. The ledger shows $800. Sabine shook her head. That can't be right. Peter believed the records were changed. But why would her initials be here? Maybe she witnessed something. Or helped. The words left Sabine's mouth before she could stop them. Her chest tightened. No, she whispered. She is cruel, but she wouldn't. She remembered Lenora counting coins with Mr. Vale in the parlor. She remembered sealed envelopes carried through the kitchen. She remembered her mother warning boarders not to speak about property papers in front of Sabine, because she would not understand. Sabine looked at the list again. There were 14 family names. Why did no one believe Peter? Vale said he was unstable. Then money disappeared from the land office. Vale accused Peter, and the town believed him. Vale feeds the town. Sabine ran her fingers along the page. I remember these names. Emil looked at her. They stayed at Mercer House. The Danners, Mr. Holt, Widow Crane, the Bell brothers. They all met with Vale or his clerk in our parlor. When? Over several years. Can you remember what they said? Sabine closed her eyes. Voices returned. People had spoken freely around her because they believed she was slow. Because she carried trays. Because she stood near walls and kept her eyes lowered. Mr. Holt said he had already paid the spring note, she whispered. Vale told him the payment was interest only. Widow Crane cried because the signature on the second paper was not hers. Mr. Vale said grief had confused her. Emil pulled a chair closer. What else? Sabine remembered. Dates, meals, mud on boots, seals on envelopes. Lenora locking papers in the blue cabinet. She remembered everything. For the first time, what people called her silence did not feel like emptiness. It felt like a room filled with evidence. They spent the next week studying Peter's notes. Sabine matched names to conversations she had overheard. Emil found old county maps showing property lines before Vale's purchases. Many pages were incomplete. Some names had question marks. Peter had been close to proving something, but not close enough. The ridgelights continued. 1, 2, 3. Emil and Sabine began watching together from the upper window. On the 5th night, Sabine noticed that the light did not come from the same place each time. It is moving downhill, she said. Emil studied the ridge. You're right. Someone wants us to follow. Or wants us to leave the lodge unguarded. Sabine thought of the signal. Come. What if Peter taught the code to someone else? Emil's face tightened. Who knew him well? A few people. Who believed him? One. Who? Ruth Calder. She worked at Vale's office. Worked. She vanished a month before Peter did. The next morning, they found a strip of blue cloth tied to a pine branch near the upper trail. Sabine recognized the fabric. Mercer House used the same blue cloth for kitchen aprons. This came from town, she said. Tracks led toward an abandoned fire lookout. Emil wanted Sabine to remain at the lodge. She refused. I have stayed behind all my life. The trail is dangerous. So is ignorance, he almost argued. Then he handed her a walking stick. They climbed through deep snow for nearly 2 hours. The lookout stood above the tree line, leaning slightly in the wind. Its windows were boarded. Smoke rose faintly from a pipe near the roof. Emil approached first. "Ruth!" he called. No answer. He knocked. Something moved inside. A woman's voice whispered, "Are you alone?" "No." The door opened a few inches. A thin woman with dark hair looked out. Her face was pale, and one eye was bruised yellow from an old injury. She saw Sabine and went still. "Mercer's girl," she said. Sabine recognized her then. Ruth Calder had once rented the attic room at Mercer House. She had left suddenly after Lenora accused her of stealing. "You knew Peter," Sabine said. Ruth's eyes filled. "He said you would understand the lights." Emil gripped the doorframe. "Where is he?" Ruth's face broke. Sabine knew the answer before the woman spoke. "He is dead." Emil did not move. The wind passed over the ridge with a long, low sound. Ruth opened the door fully. Inside the lookout was another woman, younger than Sabine, wrapped in blankets near a small stove. She had a swollen ankle and frightened eyes. "This is Clara Voss," Ruth said. "She worked in Vale's house." Clara looked down. Ruth turned to Emil. "Peter found me after Vale's men came looking. I had copied account pages. Peter helped me escape. He said he would bring the county investigator here." "What happened?" Emil asked. Ruth began crying. "He never reached the county road. Vale's men followed him. There was a struggle near Black Creek. Peter fell through river ice." Emil stared at her. "You saw it?" "Yes." "And you left him?" Ruth flinched. Sabine stepped closer to Emil. "She was being hunted." "He was my brother." "I know. You don't know." His voice cracked. Ruth covered her mouth. Emil turned away, breathing hard. For one terrible moment, Sabine feared grief would become rage. Instead, he sank onto a wooden bench, his shoulders folded. "I told him to leave," he whispered. "Those were my last words." Sabine knelt in front of him. She did not touch him at first. "Emil," he shook his head. "I told him the lodge mattered more than his foolish accusations. You were wrong." He looked at her, startled. Sabine's eyes filled. "You were wrong, and you have carried that every day. But Vale killed the truth. Your anger did not." Emil pressed both hands over his face. Sabine placed her hand gently on his wrist. He began to cry. There was nothing quiet or dignified about it. The sound came from years of waiting, hoping, blaming, and imagining. Sabine stayed beside him. She did not tell him to be strong. She did not say Peter was in a better place. She simply remained. After a long time, Emil lowered his hands. "Why the lights?" he asked Ruth. "Peter told me that if something happened, I should signal the lodge. I was afraid to come sooner. Vale has people watching the roads." "And Clara?" Clara spoke so softly, Sabine barely heard her. "Mr. Vale's wife died last year. I was hired to keep the house. He took my wages to repay room and board. Then he said I owed him for dresses I never asked for. He locked my papers in his desk." Sabine felt cold anger move through her. "Did he hurt you?" Clara looked toward the stove. "He said no one would believe a servant." Ruth continued for her. Clara found Peter's copied ledger hidden behind a panel in Vale's study. When Vale realized she had seen it, she ran. "We need to take you both to the sheriff," Emil said. Ruth laughed bitterly. "Sheriff Dane drinks at Vale's table. Then the county judge. The road is watched." Sabine looked around the small lookout. "How much food do you have?" 2 days, Ruth said. "We'll bring you to the lodge." Emil shook his head. If Vale knows they are here, he'll come. Good, Sabine said. Everyone looked at her. She was surprised by her own calm. He thinks people like us hide, she continued. He thinks fear keeps us quiet. He expects Ruth to disappear, Clara to be ashamed, and you to remain angry and alone. He expects me to know nothing. What are you suggesting? Emil asked. We let him continue believing that. They brought Ruth and Clara to the lodge through the Eastern Trail. For the next several days, Sabine formed a plan. It was not a brave plan in the way men in Bellwether understood bravery. No guns were cleaned. No threats were sent. No one rode into town demanding justice. Sabine cooked. She sent word that Sayer Lodge would reopen for a winter supper celebrating the coming survey road. Invitations went to the county recorder, the railway inspector, the circuit judge, Bellwether's church leaders, landowners, and Gideon Vale himself. Emil looked at the guest list. You invited your mother? Yes. Why? Because she will come. How do you know? Because she believes I failed. Ruth and Clara remained hidden in the upper rooms. Peter's notes were copied. Clara wrote down every document she had seen in Vale's study. Ruth organized the stolen account pages she had carried for 4 years. There was still one problem. The original Mercer House papers were missing. Sabine believed Lenora had them. She returned to Bellwether alone. Emil objected, but Sabine insisted. Vale would notice him. Sabine had spent her life unnoticed. Mercer House looked smaller than she remembered. Lenora opened the door and stared at her. Sabine wore a dark green dress she had sewn from lodge cloth. It fit her body instead of trying to hide it. Her hair was pinned neatly. She carried no bag. You came back, Lenora said. I came to invite you to supper. Lenora looked past her. Where is he? At the lodge. So he sent you away? No, he will. Sabine let the words pass. Lenora stepped aside. You may come in. The dining room was empty. Only 3 boarders remained. What happened? Sabine asked. People are cautious because of winter. It was not true. Mercer House had depended on Sabine's cooking, cleaning, and quiet care. Without her, meals burned. Rooms stayed cold. Boarders left. Lenora sat in her usual chair. You look well fed. Sabine felt the old shame rise. She rested one hand on the table. I am. Lenora's eyes narrowed. He encourages you? He does not discuss my body while I eat. That is not kindness. It is neglect. Sabine almost laughed, but the sadness was too deep. You taught me hunger was love, she said. I taught you control. You locked food away. You stole. I took bread. You took what was not yours. I made the bread. Lenora's face hardened. Why are you here? Sabine placed the invitation on the table. Gideon Vale will attend. Lenora looked at it too quickly. Sabine noticed. We are honoring the Ridge families, she continued. Mr. Vale has done business with many of them. He has helped many people. Did he help you? Lenora stood. Leave. Sabine's heart began pounding. She had expected anger. She had not expected fear. Peter Sayer kept notes, Sabine said. Lenora's face lost color. He wrote your initials beside the Mercer debt. You know nothing about business. I know you met Vale in this room. Get out. I know Widow Crane said the second signature was not hers. I know Mr. Holt paid twice. I know Ruth Calder did not steal from you. Lenora struck the table with her palm. You think because a lonely man gives you a warm bed, you have become clever. Sabine flinched. Lenora saw it and pressed harder. He pities you. That is all. Men like him collect broken things because it makes them feel noble. Sabine's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Where are the papers? What papers? Papa's loan papers. I burned them. You keep everything. Lenora became silent. Sabine remembered the blue cabinet, but Lenora would never leave evidence in a place Sabine knew. Then she remembered winter mornings after Thomas died. Lenora had begun carrying coal from the shed herself. She never let Sabine do it for almost a month. The coal shed. Sabine turned toward the kitchen. Lenora moved in front of her. You are not searching my house. I'm not. She went to the back door. Her mother followed. Sabine crossed the yard and opened the coal shed. Dust filled the air. A rusted stove sat in the corner, unused since the chimney cracked years ago. She knelt beside it. Behind a loose brick, her fingers touched metal. Lenora grabbed her shoulder. "Stop!" Sabine pulled out a small tin box. Her mother's nails dug through the cloth of her dress. Sabine stood. For the first time in her life, she understood how much stronger she was. She did not push Lenora. She did not threaten her. She simply removed her mother's hand from her shoulder. The act left Lenora staring. Inside the box were folded deeds, loan agreements, and letters bearing Vale's seal. One letter promised Lenora ownership of Mercer House if she persuaded certain boarders to sign revised notes. Another offered payment for reports about Peter Sayer's movements. Sabine read the lines twice. Her mother watched her. "I had no choice," Lenora said. Sabine's voice barely worked. "You told Vale where Peter was going. I told him Peter had been asking questions. You helped them follow him. I did not know anyone would die. You knew they would stop him." Lenora's face crumpled, but not from guilt alone. "I was trying to save this house. You were trying to own it. It was the only thing I had. You had me." Lenora looked at her. Sabine waited. Her mother said nothing. That silence hurt more than every insult. Sabine closed the box. "Why did you keep me hungry?" Lenora's mouth tightened. "Do not make this childish. Why? You were difficult. I worked. You wanted praise. I wanted food. You wanted everything your father gave you." Sabine's tears slipped free. "What did he give me? Hope." The word came out like an accusation. Lenora turned away. "He believed you could become someone," she said. "He praised every loaf, every school lesson, every ridiculous drawing. When he looked at you, he saw possibility. And you hated that." "I feared it." Sabine could hardly breathe. Lenora's voice shook now. "If you understood what you could do, you would leave. If others saw it, they would help you leave. Then, I would be alone with the debts, the boarders, the work, and the knowledge that your father loved you in a way he never loved me." Sabine stared at the woman who had shaped her shame. "You starved me because you were afraid I might become strong. I kept you dependent. The honesty was worse than denial." Lenora covered her face. "I told myself you needed me," she whispered. "After enough years, I needed it to be true." Sabine cried quietly. Part of her wanted her mother to reach for her. Another part still wished to hear an apology that could make the past less real. Lenora lowered her hands. "Give me the box." "No. Sabine, Vale will destroy us both. He already destroyed us. You do not understand what will happen." "I understand exactly." Lenora's voice sharpened. "If you expose him, Mercer House will be taken. I may be arrested. People will turn on me." Sabine held the box against her chest. "For years," she said, "you told me consequences were how people learned. I am your mother. Yes, you cannot leave me to ruin." Sabine's face twisted with pain. "I can refuse to lie for you." Lenora stepped closer. "After everything I did to keep you alive," Sabine looked into her mother's eyes, "you kept me alive enough to work." She walked away carrying the box. The supper at Sayer Lodge began under a clear black sky. Lanterns lined the porch. Fires warmed both dining rooms. Sabine prepared roast beef, herb potatoes, winter carrots, fresh bread, and apple cake. The tables were set with polished silver and simple pine branches. Guests arrived by sleigh and wagon. They stared when Sabine welcomed them at the door. Some looked embarrassed. Others smiled too brightly. Amos Croft removed his hat. "Well, Sabine, mountain air agrees with you." She met his eyes. "Respect agrees with me." He had no answer. Gideon Vale arrived wearing a black coat with a fur collar. He was a handsome man in his 50s, silver-haired and calm. Lenora walked behind him. Emil stood near the fireplace. Vale shook his hand. "I am pleased you have returned to business." "I never left it," Emil said. Vale smiled. "Grief can feel like business to a lonely man." Emil's jaw tightened. Sabine touched his sleeve lightly. He looked at her and breathed. The meal began. Sabine did not eat in the kitchen. She sat beside Emil at the head table. Whispers passed through the room. Lenora stared. After the apple cake was served, Emil stood. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Tonight was meant to celebrate the road. Instead, it will serve another purpose." Vale placed his fork down. The county recorder looked confused. Sabine rose beside Emil. Her legs trembled beneath her dress. She looked at the faces before her. People who had laughed. People who had watched. People who had told themselves silence was kindness. "I worked at Mercer House for most of my life," she began. "People spoke freely around me. Some believed I was too dull to understand. Others believed servants do not remember." Lenora whispered. "Sabine, sit down." Sabine continued. "I remember Mr. Holt paying Gideon Vale $300 on March 12th, 6 years ago. I remember Vale telling him the payment would clear the principal. I remember Widow Crane refusing to sign a second note. I remember my mother holding her hand while Mr. Vale's clerk guided the pen." The room became still. Vale leaned back. "This is an unusual kind of entertainment." Sabine looked at the county recorder. Peter Sayer recorded the same events. Emil opened Peter's notebook. Vale's smile faded. Ruth entered from the side hall. Several people gasped. Vale stood. "You," he said. Ruth placed copied account pages on the table. "These are records from Vale's office," she said. "They show payments removed, debts doubled, and false late fees used to seize land." Vale looked toward the door. Sheriff Dane remained seated. Beside him stood a county investigator who had arrived with the circuit judge. Clara entered next. She carried the original ledger from Vale's study. Vale's face changed for the first time. "How did you get that?" Clara's voice shook, but she remained standing. "You told me servants were invisible." The circuit judge opened the ledger. Sabine placed the tin box beside it. "These letters connect Vale to my mother and to the false Mercer debt. They also show that my mother reported Peter Sayer's movements before his disappearance." A murmur passed through the guests. Lenora stood abruptly. "She is confused. My daughter has always struggled to understand serious matters." Sabine looked at her. For once, the insult sounded weak. Mrs. Finch rose near the back table. "No," the old woman said. "Sabine understood everything. We simply pretended she did not, because it made our lives easier." Amos Croft lowered his eyes. Widow Crane began to cry. The county investigator examined the letters. "Mr. Vale," he said, "you will remain here while these records are reviewed." Vale laughed. "You think papers carried by servants and an unstable woman can threaten me?" The circuit judge closed the ledger. "They already have." Vale turned to Sheriff Dane. "Remove them." Sheriff Dane did not move. "You paid me to ignore complaints," the sheriff said. "You did not pay me enough to face a county inquiry." Vale's calm finally broke. "You coward." Sheriff Dane looked ashamed. "Yes." There was no fight, no gunfire, no dramatic escape through the snow. Gideon Vale sat at the table while the county investigator collected the records. The people who had once rushed to greet him now moved their chairs away. Lenora stood alone. She looked at Sabine with a face full of disbelief. "You planned this?" "Yes." "You brought me here to humiliate me?" "No. I brought you here so the truth would not be hidden in another back room. You will regret this." Sabine's eyes filled, but her voice remained steady. "I regret what happened to Peter. I regret Ruth lived in hiding. I regret Clara believed no one would protect her. I regret spending years thinking hunger was the price of being allowed to live." She looked around the room. "I do not regret telling the truth." The investigation lasted 3 months. Vale was charged with fraud, coercion, bribery, and theft of property. Several deeds were returned to their original owners. His company was placed under county control. Men who had praised him began claiming they had always suspected something. Bellwether removed his name from the church hall. Lenora lost Mercer House because the deed had been obtained through fraud. She was not sent to prison, but she was ordered to repay money and testify against Vale. Most of her friends stopped visiting. Some did it from moral outrage. Others feared being questioned. She wrote Sabine 6 letters. The first blamed Emil, the second blamed Vale, the third blamed Thomas. The fourth asked for money. The fifth said she was ill. The sixth contained only 5 words. A daughter should forgive her mother. Sabine read the letter beside the lodge fireplace. Emil sat across from her, carving a small piece of pine. "What will you do?" he asked. "I don't know. You don't owe her rescue." "She is still my mother." "Yes. She has nowhere to go. She has choices. They are simply no longer comfortable." Sabine looked at the fire. "Is that cruel?" "No. It feels cruel. Because she trained you to believe boundaries are cruelty when they stop serving her." Sabine began to cry. Emil set down the wood. "May I sit beside you?" he asked. She nodded. He moved to the chair near hers, leaving space between them. "I wanted her to love me," Sabine whispered. "Even after everything. When she admitted why she kept me weak, part of me still wanted to take her hand. That does not make you weak. It feels foolish. It means you are grieving someone who was alive, but never became the mother you needed." Sabine covered her eyes. Emil waited. Slowly, she lowered one hand between them. He looked at it. "May I?" he asked. "Yes." He held her hand. His palm was warm and rough. Sabine cried until the fire burned low. She did not send money. She sent Lenora the address of a respectable women's residence in the county seat, and a letter stating that she would not pay the debts, lie to the judge, or ask anyone to overlook the harm she had done. Lenora never replied. Spring came slowly to the ridge. Snow melted from the lower trail. The first guests arrived at Sayer Lodge. Some came for the road survey. Others came because they had heard about Sabine's cooking, or the famous supper that brought down Gideon Vale. Sabine managed the rooms, wages, food, and accounts. Every worker was paid. No servant slept in an unheated attic. Food remained available in the kitchen all day. When Clara chose to stay and work at the lodge, Sabine insisted she keep her own papers and savings. Ruth became the bookkeeper and traveled twice a month to the county office to help families review land records. Emil repaired the old lookout and placed a brass plaque inside. Peter Sayer saw what others refused to see. One evening, Sabine found Emil standing there alone. The sunset turned the mountains gold. She joined him at the railing. "I used to believe if I solved what happened to him, I would stop feeling guilty," he said. "Did it help?" "No," Sabine nodded. "Truth does not always heal. Sometimes it only tells us where the wound is." Emil looked at her. "You say things no one else says. People rarely asked what I thought. They were fools." She smiled faintly. For a while, they watched shadows move across the valley. Then Emil said, "I need to tell you something." Sabine's body tensed automatically. He noticed. "I'm not asking anything from you." She forced herself to breathe. "All right. When you first came to the lodge, I told myself I needed help reopening it. You did. I also needed noise in the rooms." Sabine looked toward him. "I could not bear the silence anymore," he continued. "Then you filled it. Not loudly. You hummed while kneading bread. You spoke to the horses. You laughed once when the flour sack split." "I did not laugh." "You did. I was upset. You laughed while upset." She tried not to smile. Emil's expression became serious. "I care for you." The fear arrived before joy. Sabine stepped back from the railing. Emil did not follow. She hated herself for the movement. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything. You will expect something." "No. Everyone expects something. I expect honesty." "What if the honest answer hurts you?" "Then it hurts." Sabine wrapped her arms around herself. "My mother said kindness was how men trapped foolish women." "I know. She said you would tire of me." "I know. What if you do?" "Then I would tell you before turning cruel. That is not comforting." "No," he admitted. "But it is honest." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I care for you too," she whispered. "And it makes me afraid every day." Emil's face softened. "I am afraid too. Of me." of losing what we have, of asking too much, of becoming another person who takes your trust and calls it love. Sabine looked at him. The wind moved gently around the lookout. What happens now? She asked. Tomorrow, we work. And after that? The next day, we work again. She laughed through her tears. Emil smiled. We don't have to name anything tonight, he said. Sabine stepped closer. May I stand beside you? You already are. Their shoulders touched. That was all. It was enough. Months passed. Affection grew through ordinary things. Emil warmed Sabine's gloves near the stove before morning chores. Sabine left coffee beside his tools when he worked late. He learned that she disliked thunder, but loved watching snow. She learned he could repair a roof in a storm, but could not fold a fitted sheet. They spoke about Peter. They spoke about Thomas. Sabine told Emil how her father used to lift her onto the kitchen counter and ask her opinion of every stew. Emil told her Peter sang badly and loudly whenever he was nervous. They cried sometimes. They laughed more often. Emil never touched Sabine without invitation. The first time she rested her head against his shoulder, they were sitting on the porch after a long day. Her body stiffened at once. Emil remained still. You can move, he said. I don't want to. All right. You're not uncomfortable? No. I'm heavy. I noticed. She lifted her head, wounded. His eyes widened. That sounded wrong. Sabine stared at him. Emil rubbed one hand over his face. I mean, your body is not a surprise. You did not trick me by leaning against my shoulder. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Emil looked relieved. She rested her head against him again. You are terrible at tenderness, she said. I have been alone a long time. You need practice. Will you help? Yes. The answer came easily. Nearly a year after Sabine left Mercer House, the people of Bellwether faced an early winter. The freight road washed out after 3 days of cold rain. Vale's old warehouse, now controlled by the county, had been poorly maintained. Half the stored flour spoiled. Coal deliveries stopped below the pass. The town sent a delegation to Sayer Lodge. Amos Croft came with the church deacon and 2 shopkeepers. Sabine met them in the great room. They removed their hats. Amos cleared his throat. Miss Mercer, Sabine is fine. We understand the lodge has winter stores. It does. The town needs flour, beans, and coal. Sabine waited. The deacon spoke carefully. Children may go hungry. I will not let children go hungry. Relief moved across their faces. We knew you would help, Amos said. You've always been generous. Sabine looked at him. He remembered too late how often he had mocked her at breakfast. We will sell supplies at cost, she said. Families without money can work repayment after winter. Written agreements will be simple and reviewed by Ruth. Of course. There will be no interest. Very fair. Mercer House will receive the same amount as every other residence. Amos glanced at the deacon. Lenora had returned to Bellwether 2 weeks earlier. She was living in 2 rented rooms above the closed boarding house while waiting for the property decision. She may need more, the deacon said. No. She is your mother. Yes. You would let her freeze. I will provide the same coal and food offered to everyone. She may lose the house entirely. That is the court's decision. Amos shifted. Could you speak for her? No. Sabine, mercy. I am showing mercy. I am not repeating cruelty. She will have heat. She will have food. I will not restore the power she used to harm me. No one argued after that. For 2 months, Sayer Lodge supplied Bellwether. The same townspeople who once complained that Sabine blocked doorways now waited for her instructions in the storehouse. She organized wagons, measured flour, tracked coal, and assigned deliveries. She did not humiliate them. She did not remind them of every joke. She simply refused to make herself small for their comfort. Lenora came to the lodge once. Sabine found her on the porch beneath falling snow. Her mother looked older. Her coat was thin. Pride kept her back straight. I received the coal, Lenora said. Good. And the flour. Good. Lenora looked past Sabine into the warm, great room. Guests were eating supper. Clara laughed near the fireplace. Emil carried a basket of bread from the kitchen. You built all this, Lenora said. Emil built the lodge. You brought it back. Sabine said nothing. Lenora's eyes moved over her daughter's face. You could have done this at Mercer House. No. I would have let you manage. No. You would have taken credit. Lenora flinched. Sabine felt no pleasure in it. Her mother's voice lowered. The court may remove me next month. I heard. Will you come? To the hearing? Yes. Why? So people see I am not alone. Sabine looked at the snow. For years, Lenora had used Sabine's presence as proof of her own goodness. The dutiful daughter, the difficult burden, the large silent girl who never contradicted her. I won't stand beside you as a lie, Sabine said. Lenora's eyes filled. Then you have become hard. Sabine thought about that. No, she said. I have become clear. Her mother looked toward Emil. He turned you against me. He gave me a room with a lock on the inside. Lenora began to cry. It was the first time Sabine had seen her cry without using tears as a weapon. For one moment, she looked small and tired. Sabine stepped onto the porch. She wanted to embrace her. She did not. Instead, she handed Lenora a wrapped loaf of warm bread. You can stay for supper, she said. Lenora looked at the bread. Will people stare? Some may. Will you sit with me? Sabine's heart ached. For one meal, she said. Not as proof that nothing happened. Not as forgiveness you have not earned. Lenora nodded. They ate at a small table near the window. The conversation was awkward. Lenora praised the soup, then seemed ashamed. Sabine asked about the rooms in town. Lenora admitted they were cold. At the end of the meal, Lenora stood. I am sorry, she said. Sabine waited. Her mother's face twisted. I do not know how to say it in a way that repairs anything. You can't repair it with words. I know. Sabine's eyes filled. Lenora looked toward the door. Your father would be proud. The sentence nearly broke her. Sabine pressed one hand against the table. You don't get to give me his approval, she whispered. You kept it from me when I needed it. Lenora lowered her head. You're right. She left before dark. Sabine stood by the window and watched her wagon disappear down the trail. Emil came beside her. Do you want me to say something? He asked. No. Do you want me to stay? Yes. He stayed. The following spring, Lenora left Bellwether. She found work at a hotel in the county seat. She sent Sabine short letters every few months. The letters did not ask for money. They did not mention forgiveness. They described ordinary things. A broken boiler, a woman who snored in the next room, a rosebush growing near the kitchen door. Sabine answered some of them. Not all. Healing did not arrive like sunlight breaking through clouds. It came in uneven pieces. Some mornings, Sabine still hesitated before taking food. Some compliments made her suspicious. Some nights, she woke believing the attic door was locked. On those nights, she walked across the hall. The green door to Peter's room was no longer locked. Sometimes Emil sat inside, reading his brother's notebook. Sabine would sit with him. Neither tried to fix the other. 2 years after the public supper, Emil and Sabine stood beneath the repaired lookout, while Ruth, Clara, Mrs. Finch, and half the lodge staff waited nearby. There was no grand crowd from Bellwether. Sabine had not wanted one. Emil wore a dark suit that fit badly across his shoulders. Sabine wore deep blue wool and carried pine branches instead of flowers. Before the judge began, Emil leaned close. You can still change your mind, Sabine smiled. You have told me that at every step. I plan to continue. I know. Are you afraid? Yes. Me too. She took his hand. Good, she said. Then we will be careful with each other. They married beneath a clear sky. There was no promise that grief would vanish. No promise that fear would never return. No promise that love would be easy. There was only a promise of room. Room to speak. Room to question. Room to eat, rest, work, grieve, laugh, and change. Years later, travelers told stories about Sayer Lodge. They spoke about the woman who could remember a conversation from 10 winters earlier. They spoke about the free records office Ruth ran near the storehouse. They spoke about Clara, who became the lodge's first elected business manager. They spoke about Emil, the quiet mountain man who repaired anything except a folded sheet. Most of all, they spoke about Sabine. Some called her strong, some called her brilliant, some called her intimidating after she corrected their accounts. She accepted all three. Above the main fireplace hung Peter's lantern. Beneath it was a wooden sign carved by Emil. It read, "No one here must apologize for taking up space." Sabine saw it every morning. At first, the words made her cry. Later, they made her smile. One winter evening, a young woman arrived at the lodge, wearing a thin coat and carrying a small bag. She stood in the doorway, shivering. "I heard you hire women," she said. "We do," Sabine replied. "I can clean." "What else can you do?" The woman looked confused. "I don't know." "What would you like to learn?" No one had ever asked her that. Her eyes filled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Sabine felt the old ache in her chest. She stepped aside and opened the door wider. "You do not have to say that here." The young woman looked at the warm room, the full tables, and the people moving freely through the light. "May I come in?" Sabine smiled. Yes. Outside, snow covered the mountain trail and softened every hard edge. The ridge stood dark against the evening sky. Once, those mountains had seemed like walls hiding danger. Now, lights shone from the lodge windows, the storehouse, the lookout, and the small homes built nearby. One light, then another, then another. Not a warning, not a signal of fear. A welcome. Sabine stood in the doorway while warmth moved around her. She thought of the girl she had once been, carrying coal with an empty stomach, asking forgiveness from every room she entered. That girl had not been weak. She had been watching. She had been remembering. She had been surviving long enough to reach a place where survival could become a life. The town had tried to make her invisible because invisible people were useful. They heard secrets. They carried burdens. They asked for little. They made cruelty easy to ignore. But invisibility had taught Sabine where people hid the truth. Patience had taught her when to speak. Hunger had taught her what kindness should look like. Loneliness had taught her to recognize another lonely soul. Emil had not saved her by carrying her away. He had simply opened a door and allowed her to decide whether to enter. Sabine had done the rest. And when the people who had betrayed her finally came asking for help, she gave them fairness instead of revenge, food instead of humiliation, and truth instead of comforting lies. She did not save them from every consequence. She did not need to. Her victory was not that they suffered. Her victory was that she no longer had to suffer in order to prove she was good. The woman everyone tried to shrink became the center of a place built around dignity. The servant became the keeper of accounts. The burden became the provider. The silent daughter became the voice no judge could ignore. And the mountain man who had spent years speaking only to grief found a home filled with bread, footsteps, questions, arguments, music, and laughter. On quiet nights, Sabine and Emil still climbed to the lookout. They would stand beneath the stars and watch lanterns glow along the ridge. Sometimes Emil spoke about Peter. Sometimes Sabine spoke about her father. Sometimes neither said a word. Their hands rested together on the wooden rail. Below them, Sayer Lodge shone against the snow. Sabine no longer wondered whether she deserved the warmth. She had built it. She no longer feared that affection was a trap. Love had not asked her to disappear. It had given her room to become visible. And at last, Sabine Mercer understood the truth that had been waiting inside her all along. Her worth had never begun when Emil noticed her. It had never depended on the town's apology, her mother's regret, or a judge's decision. Her worth had been present in every loaf she baked, every insult she survived, every detail she remembered, and every morning she rose when the world had given her no reason to believe the day would be kind. She had always been worthy. The only thing that changed was that she finally stopped apologizing for it.